Oops. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Mike Milinkovich. I'm the Executive Director of the Eclipse Foundation, and want to thank everybody for joining. We've got quite a bit of ground to cover in this presentation today. I want to say in advance that there's a lot of moving parts here. So, feel free to ask questions. We will. You can send questions either to the Eclipse Foundation Twitter handle or in the Crowdcast chat box. I will answer all the questions at the end, though, so I don't lose my flow. But please, it's very important that if you don't understand something, that you ask. And so, the purpose of this town hall is to give all of our members an update of the transition of the Eclipse Foundation to a European-based organization. We made this announcement back in May, but now we've been working pretty hard at making this happen, and we've now got to the point where we really need to communicate with our members and our committer population about the changes that are being made. So in this session, we hope to cover all of the topics of what are we doing, what are the changes, what is the impact to our members, what actions are required from you as members. Where can you find out more and answer any questions at the end? So on May 12th, we announced the Eclipse Foundation is moving to Europe. So our belief is that as a European organization, we are going to be able to help foster worldwide innovation around open source and have a more global impact. But of course, it begs the question, why are we doing this? The story all started back in October of last year when we had a board meeting and we were doing the strategy setting for 2020. And a number of our board members were mentioning that, hey, look, the Eclipse Foundation seems to be pretty strong in Europe. Go do an analysis of what you're finding in terms of our strength in Europe and what we should be doing about this to, double down on this and become even stronger in Europe. And so we started doing that analysis in late October of last year. And quickly we found out, or came to the realization, would probably be a better way to put it, that 70% of our paying members are based in Europe, 70% of our committers are based in Europe, and 1/3 of our staff is based in Europe. And that based on those numbers, we already are the largest open source foundation in Europe. In addition, we've been operating a wholly owned subsidiary, Eclipse Foundation Europe GmbH, in Europe for 7 years. And so we've got quite a bit of experience operating in Europe. In addition, as part of that, we are engaged in a number of European research programs, particularly H2020. These programs have been quite successful, and our participation, particularly around the dissemination of the research results, have been successful and well regarded. We also realized that because of a number of initiatives that are being undertaken by European government and industry, that there was a real need for an open source foundation of international reach and reputation for Europe. And so we decided to jump in and undertake meeting that requirement, and by doing so, increasing our global impact. And it's important to note that this transition has been backed unanimously by the strategic members of the foundation and, in fact, the entire board. As we've gone through this, we've had a number of votes at the board level in terms of supporting this transition, enabling this transition and supporting this transition, approving the plans, and so on. And every single one of those votes at the board has been unanimous. So what are the key steps that we're going to be undertaking to enable this transition? So the first one is that we are creating a new Belgian-based international not-for-profit. And this is a relatively new corporate structure in Belgium. The French initials is AISBL. I won't subject any of our French friends to my terrible French pronunciation, but the first step is to file incorporation documents with the Belgian authorities, which we did a couple of weeks ago. And it now takes about 60 days to get what's called the Royal Decree, which establishes us as an international nonprofit. So we do expect that this process will be finalized by early to mid-October, based on the normal, rates of, which the bureaucratic machinery operates. And so as part of that, we've created new bylaws and a membership agreement. And we'll talk a little bit about the bylaws in particular and some of the changes that have happened. But the design point was to create bylaws that were compliant with Belgian law, but which were as close as possible to our existing bylaws. And so in addition to that, the bylaws stipulate that we will also continue to comply with the US 501c6 requirements. And so that means that we will continue to, despite this transition, we will continue to operate exactly as we always have for the past 16 years. So in addition to creating this new Belgian INPA, we also are going to be changing some of the core governance documents of the Eclipse Foundation, Inc., the U.S. organization that has been at the center of our community for the past 16 years. And really, the changes that we're making there are to make the governance align with this new Belgian organization. And so this requires revisions to our bylaws and our membership agreement, and we'll go through what those revisions are, which have been unanimously approved by the board. And part of the reason why we're having this town hall today is that starting on Monday, we're going to be having a vote of the membership at large to support these new bylaws and membership agreement to help support the transition. Once the Royal Decree has happened and we have a foundation in Belgium, and we've modified the governance rules in the US, which we expect to have happen around early to mid-October, we are going to start transitioning our members from the Eclipse Foundation US to the Eclipse Foundation Belgium. So you will be, as a new member, as an existing member, be asked to execute new membership agreements, working group participation agreements, and committer agreements. And these and it's important to remember that when I say members, that in most cases, not all, but in most cases, our committers are also members of the Eclipse Foundation. And so this applies as much to you as a committer as it does to the organizations that make up the corporate side of our membership. So a key change that's happening is changes to our fee structure. And so the board, including all of the strategic members who are, for whom this has the greatest financial impact, have unanimously approved changes to the membership fees. And basically, the fees we're restating what was in previously in US dollars to be stated in euros. So if your fee is currently $20,000, your fee will now be 20,000 euros. And this change is effective October 1st. The way that the existing US bylaws work is that changes to the membership fees are approved by the board, by a supermajority of the board of directors. This was approved unanimously in our last meeting and become effective October 1st. We do realize that this is an increase in the fees, and we also realize that there's a lot going on in the world right now. And so in recognition of that, for the first year, October 2020 to September 2021, the fee will be discounted for renewing members by 10%. And so this, we believe, will significantly reduce the financial impact in 2021 for our existing members. Both the Eclipse Foundation US and the Eclipse Foundation Belgium will have an identical fee structure. So that's important. There's not like an opportunity to have an arbitrage between which entity you belong to. What does this mean for working group fees? And so to be clear, there's nothing in this transition that will require any changes to working group fees. Down the road, and any individual working group might decide to revisit their fee structure and restate in euros in the future. But there is no requirement being placed on any working group by the Eclipse Foundation to change any of their fees as a result of this transition. It's also important to note that this is the first time we have changed our fees in well over a decade. And a big part of the motivation for doing this change is to simply reflect that the Eclipse Foundation is going to be European based. And so using euros as the currency, it's just part of being a European entity. So a key change is also is that we've restructured our membership classes, and this is being reflected in both the new bylaws in Belgium and the revisions to the bylaws in the United States. So as many of you know, we currently have two classes of strategic member: strategic developer, strategic consumer. Those two classes have been collapsed into a single strategic member class. We've removed the enterprise class of membership entirely, and we've renamed solutions member to contributing member because we believe that that name better reflects their contributions to the Eclipse community. And how does a member contribute to the Eclipse Foundation? It might be simply they're contributing money to help support the operations of the Eclipse Foundation. But in most cases, as you're well aware, they're also contributing by supporting one or more projects in the Eclipse Foundation, adopting projects within the Eclipse community, and generally supporting the Eclipse community in their activities. Another key change is the notion of the membership at large. First of all, it's generally referred to as the General Assembly under Belgian law. But the General Assembly under Belgian law has far greater rights and responsibilities than the rights and responsibilities that the membership at large has historically held within the US organization. So in particular, the General Assembly must approve any changes to the bylaws and the membership agreement. That's the same as it is today. No change there. However, each year, the General Assembly must approve the annual budget. They must approve the selection of the auditor and the acceptance of the audited financial statements, and in fact, even approve the remuneration, the payments that are being made to the auditors. And they must ratify the appointments of board members to the board of directors. So as a result, we expect that we're going to have more frequent meetings of the General Assembly than we have had of the membership at large in the past. So in particular, we feel that just for, operationally, we expect that we're going to have at least 2 meetings of the General Assembly. Now, these meetings will almost certainly be held virtually. Or a combination of in-person and virtual, depending on how, things play out around the world with the pandemic. It's also the case that electronic proxy votes are acceptable and can be provided in advance of the meeting. So if you can't attend the meeting, you can provide your vote via email or some other mechanism ahead of time, and that will be encouraged for those who cannot attend. So just going through the rights and benefits of each membership class regarding governance, so representation on the board of directors. As previously, the strategic members each get to appoint a director. Contributing members have elected representation, as do committer representations. And it's important to note that the formula remains the same. So for each additional 5 strategic members, there's 1 additional contributing representative and 1 additional committer representative. And so that remains exactly the same as it has in the past. Voting on the budget and so on remains basically the same. However, the members also have votes in the General Assembly. So basically everything is the same, except it's important to note that in the bottom right corner, there is one change, which is occurring between the US and the Belgian entity, which is that in the General Assembly, committers can participate in the meetings, but their participation is non-voting. And that's primarily, we had long discussions with this at the board on this particular topic. But it was just generally felt that because, first of all, that there's so many committers. Secondly, that the committers are not contributing funding to the foundation. That having them voting on the budget and the audited financial statements every year, frankly, was not going to be interesting to them and didn't really make a lot of sense. And we did look into whether or not it's possible for committers to have, votes on certain matters and not have votes on other matters, and that just doesn't work under Belgian law. So the solution that we came up with is that committers remain members of the Eclipse Foundation. They retain the same level of representation that they have always had on the board of directors, but they're not going to be voting members of the General Assembly. So additional changes to the U.S. bylaws. So these are the changes that we're going to be asking everybody to vote on shortly, starting on Monday, in support of this transition. It's important to recognize that for some period of time, there's going to be two separate organizations, Eclipse Foundation Belgium, Eclipse Foundation US, that will have separate board of directors, separate bylaws, et cetera, et cetera. And we want to keep these organizations aligned. So strictly speaking, they can have separate policies, but we've done a lot of work to make it so that both Belgium and US have exactly the same IP policy, antitrust policy, development process, specification process, working group process. And so we've been able to do that at this point, and now we need to be able to make sure that they stay aligned for the next couple of years. As part of this, the Eclipse Foundation Belgium will become a member of the Eclipse Foundation US, and this Eclipse Foundation Belgium will become the single member of a new class of membership called Strategic Foundation Member, and will have the ability to appoint multiple seats to the board of directors at the Eclipse Foundation. And so that's entirely there to make sure that the two organizations continue to be aligned as the number of members in the Eclipse Foundation US declines. So this protects both the nonprofit status of both organizations while meeting the strategic goals of our transition to Europe. So changes to the membership agreement. The first and most important thing is that we made a lot of effort to significantly simplify and shorten the membership agreement. So basically, every single clause that's in the membership agreement, we looked at it and said, do we really need this? Or if we really need it, can we shorten it? But the main changes to the membership agreement is simply to reflect the new classes of membership. So the fact that we got rid of enterprise, that we merged strategic developer and strategic consumer, that we renamed solutions member to contributing members, all of these must be reflected in a new membership agreement. And that's why we're going to be asking you to vote in support of modifying this membership agreement. So what's not changing? So the governance structure remains exactly the same. So the elected representatives for the committer and contributing members continue to be there, continue to be voted in using exactly the same process and algorithm as before. And in addition to that, we specifically went through the effort to appoint the initial board of the new Belgium entity to be exactly the same people as the existing board in the US. So we have 100% continuity at the board level as we undertake this transition. And this will stay the same until we have elections in 2021. The board and the committees, so there's 3 committees of the board. There's the Finance Committee, Compensation Committee, and IP Advisory Committee. There's some subtle differences between how these committees are structured just under Belgian law versus US law, but the mission for these 3 committees remains the same, and the people that are on those 3 committees will remain the same. In terms of the organization, it's important to recognize that the Eclipse projects and working groups are not affected by these changes. So we laid the groundwork to put in the IP policy and antitrust policy in the U.S. before we filed for Belgian royal decree. So the two organizations have word for word exactly the same IP policy, antitrust policy, development process, specification process, working group process. And so collaboration can continue in our working groups and in our projects unaffected by these changes. The staff and the EMO, including the Architecture Council, remain the same. The role of the Architecture Council remains the same. And the existing staff in Canada and throughout Europe remains the same. So you'll continue to interact with the same people at the same email address, doing the same job as we go through this transition. So as I've mentioned before, to make this all work and to enable the transition, the existing bylaws and membership agreements must be approved by the membership at large. So this vote is going to start off on August 31st and will run for a month. And obviously this is strategically important to the future of the Eclipse Foundation, and we certainly encourage everybody to vote. Ballots will be distributed automatically on Monday morning, August 31st. If you don't receive a ballot and think you should have, please contact, emo@eclipse-foundation.org. And we'll make sure that we get you a ballot. My apologies for not having that on the slide. So additional changes in governance documents. So of course, as we do this transition, all of our key agreements have to be modified to change Eclipse Foundation US or eclipse.org Foundation, Inc. period to Eclipse Foundation AISBL. So we're going to be, unfortunately, everybody is going to have to do some work because we're going to be asking everybody to re-execute these agreements when they update their membership agreement. And in addition to the membership agreement, all of the committer agreements have to be done as well. So if you're an individual committer, you will be asked to re-sign an individual committer agreement. And if your employer is a member and has signed a member, committer, and contributor agreement, commonly known as MCCA, your employer will be asked to re-sign that agreement. While we were in there changing the MCCA, we did one additional enhancement as well, which is the agreement for many years has asked to list the current committers at the time of execution, and then from there on rely upon the foundation database for the list of committers. We decided to reduce that or get rid of that requirement that they be listed in an exhibit because it's far simpler an agreement once you've done that, and it's much more amenable to electronic signatures. As we mentioned, all of the working group participation agreements are going to have to be re-signed. We will be updating the Eclipse contributor agreement to reference the Belgian company rather than the US company. However, we're not going to revoke existing ECAs because we believe that they still work. So this transition should be seamless for the thousands of people who are contributors to Eclipse projects. So what is the impact to you? So beginning August 31st, all members are going to be asked to vote on the new US bylaws and membership agreement. Of course, we want everybody to vote yes. And if here or in other channels, if you have questions, please feel free to ask. We think this is a very important and exciting development for the Eclipse Foundation, and we do really want your support. Beginning in October, all members will be required to update their membership agreement. Of course, that date is going to be, whether they're asked to sign the AISBL will depend on the royal decree. But as we move members to the Belgian entity, you'll be asked to resign your membership in the existing US organization. While we're taking care of this membership agreement paperwork, we'll also be updating your other agreements at the same time. Starting October 1, all renewals will be now stated in euros, and fees will be discounted by 10% for the renewal, for this first renewal. and working group fees are unaffected and will remain in US dollars. If you are a committer member, or a committer for that matter, it's important to note that what you're doing, just keep doing it. So the Eclipse development process remains the same. We're not changing any of the supporting processes like the IP process or anything, or our infrastructure. As some of you know, we've added a third infrastructure option for our projects, which is to host them in GitLab on servers physically located in Switzerland. We are asking you to vote on the changes to our bylaws and membership agreement. If you are an individual committer member, so these are the folks who don't work for a member company and have in the past signed a membership agreement with the US entity and become a formal committer member, we will be asking you to sign the new Belgian membership agreement. Regardless of whether you are a committer member, if you have signed an individual committer agreement, then we'll also need you to re-execute that as well. If you are an employee or a consultant of a member company that has executed an MCCA, your employer will be asked to re-execute that, and no actions at all will be required on your part. And I think, going by memory, that's a little over half of all of our committers are covered in this way. So for the majority of our committers, no paperwork is going to be required on your part in order to retain your committer rights. And it's important to reiterate yet again that your elected representatives on the Eclipse board remain as they do today. So in case you don't know, that's Danny Meggert, Ed Merks, and Chris Anizek are the elected committer reps on the board of directors, and they will also be on the board of the Belgian entity. So if you have any questions, there is a frequently asked question that we've developed and posted. So that's the URL, AISBL_membership_FAQ.php. And you're always welcome to please send an email to eclipse-europe@eclipse.org. We really encourage you, if you have any questions, to please ask them. So just to reiterate yet again, we've been over this a couple of times, but it bears repeating. So when are things happening? So Monday, August 31st, voting begins on approving the changes that we need to the Eclipse Foundation US bylaws and membership agreement. And so voting will go for a month. We will be encouraging everybody to vote. And the US bylaws and revisions will go into effect as soon as practicable after the completion of the membership vote. On October 1st, the new due structure stated in euros goes into effect. And again, renewals for the first year for all existing members will be discounted by 10%. And this is specifically designed to reduce any financial impact based on exchange rates between the US dollar and the euro. And as soon as after the royal decree establishing the Eclipse Foundation AISBL is put forward, we will be contacting all of our members and committers to update their agreements with the new Belgian entity. So we hope you're as excited about this change and transition for the Eclipse Foundation as we are. If you have any questions, you can always go to eclipse.org/Europe, and there's the FAQ that's there. And you can also email us at membership@eclipse.org or at eclipse-europe@eclipse.org. And with that, I thank you, and I will stop sharing my screen and see if there's any questions.
One question asked early, Mike, was about the financial impact of this transition. And I would say both short-term and long-term. I don't know if you want to speak to it or for me too.
So the financial impact. Well, obviously we are hoping that this is going to cause the foundation to grow. We believe that this helps set up the Eclipse Foundation to have even more of a global impact than we've had in the past. So that's a big part of the motivation why we're doing this. the I don't see a lot. I mean, other than that, I mean, we're looking for growth. We in membership in particular, but also in recruiting new projects and by extension, new working groups. But as of this moment, we're not anticipating a big change in the financial structure of the Eclipse Foundation. There's some legal and accounting costs associated with this. But in terms of sort of the financial structure of the Eclipse Foundation, it's important to note that, you know, for 16 years, we've been a U.S. organization. And for most of that 16 years, the vast bulk of our staff has been based in Canada and in Europe. And that's not going to change. So I'm not moving to Europe. Paul's not moving to Europe. The staff that we have in Ottawa are not moving to Europe. So the sort of institutional memory and the core leadership group will remain in Ottawa, and that's not changing. There is going to be some costs, of course, associated with having additional organizations, each one requiring its own legal support, its own audit and accounting support. But those are not enormous costs. So we believe that they're manageable within the budget. So the next question I can see there. So hopefully, Michael, that answered your question. If you
There was a follow-on question about the transparency, right? So in the U.S., we file a Form 990 and so on. You know, I didn't type it in, but the intention is to meet the same level of financial transparency.
Yeah, well, that's actually specifically in our new bylaws, we are also retaining our 501c6 status in the U.S. So the Belgian entity, at least for the first, like, forever, as far as I'm concerned, but for the foreseeable future, the Belgian entity will also be filing Form 990s in the U.S. just like we do today. So the level of transparency and disclosure doesn't change as a result of this at all. So that's thanks for that's a great question.
It is a great question.
And we will hopefully that addressed the question. Robert asked, do we need to cancel the membership with the US or just sign with BE? And as we approach you to become a member of Eclipse Foundation Belgium, we will be asking you to simultaneously resign your membership in the Eclipse Foundation US. So we'll do that at the same time and hopefully make that as seamless as possible.
Yeah, just more on that. The reason is if you there's nothing preventing a member from being a member in both, but you would have to pay the fees for both. And we don't expect anyone to do that. There's no benefit to doing it. And so it's just cleaner to, you know, I will resign from the US and move to Belgium all as one move.
Yep.
That's why we've designed it that way.
Yep. And let's see, how long in the transition? Man, Paul is sick and tired of hearing me say this, but this is a process, not an event. So realistically, we expect that this is going to probably take a couple of years, well, certainly a year. I don't. At some point, we anticipate at this point that at some point we will wind up the U.S. nonprofit, but even that is not a absolute requirement. There could be some good legal or tax or financial reason to retain the Eclipse US organization as some sort of shell or holding company, and that we will worry about that once it becomes clear. That's
my response. So I agree with everything you just said. My focus was more in terms of having our members migrate to Belgium. I think that we want to see happen fairly quickly and realistically over a period of a few months, right? We know this is a process, and so we will be reaching out to you with, these are the agreements that we're going to look for you to execute. And we know that, you know, some organizations that's going to take a bit of time. And so that's the plan with this. We certainly would like to do it ahead of any organization's renewals, so we'll try to align it with that as best as we can. But it's not a requirement, but it just seems to make sense to do that.
Yep.
So I think that's all the questions listed there. But are there other questions?
No, there's a new question here from Kai. Will the migration incur committers to re-register user accounts for Eclipse Foundation resources? Absolutely not. No. And if that is unclear in any way, please let me know. That would we really try hard not to do things that really annoy our committers. So no, that's not. We do not anticipate that happening at all.
Yes, Webmaster had the same reaction. It was, don't do that to us. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So is there going to be a physical presence in Belgium with staff, or is this really moving the entity and governance? The answer is this is a process, not an event. And so it's really both. So basically, as soon as we get the royal decree and we have a physical and we have a legal entity in Belgium, we are going to have a mailing address in Brussels. And so that will be our legal address in Belgium. However, the day-to-day operations are going to remain as they are, which is split between staff in Canada and staff in Europe. We only actually have one employee in the United States. And so this at the outset, this is primarily about moving the entity and the governance and going under European law, for example, as opposed to US law. But it's over time, it is certainly plausible that we could have a small office in Brussels. In particular, through our research programs, we already have a strong partnership, if you will, with the European Commission. And as that grows, I could certainly imagine having a presence in Brussels to help manage just that relationship. So at this moment, there's no fixed plan to put staff into Brussels, but it could certainly happen. I sort of expect that it will happen naturally as we grow our presence in Europe. I should actually add one other thing, is we certainly anticipate that as we grow, that there is going to be sort of more organic growth in headcount in Europe than there has been in the past. And so that's something else to keep in mind as well. Okay, so we'll give it another couple of minutes to see if there's so many questions. Robert, thank you for that comment. Robert said, thanks for putting so much energy into this move, and welcome to Europe. And I want to thank Paul in particular, who's been sort of my partner in doing this. It's been a ton of work, but it's also been very interesting work and a great learning, personally a great learning experience. I now know far more about Belgian nonprofit law than I ever expected I would. And I even learned a few new things about US nonprofit law along the way. So it's been quite the journey.
Yeah, it really has been a journey. With a lot of folks participating and helping us out along the way. So and still a ways to go, but it certainly has been it's been interesting.
All right, so I don't see any more questions, so I think we'll wrap it up. I really want to thank everybody for their attention, for participating, and for your support. And I just want to say that we're really looking forward to having your support with the vote of the membership at large. And if you have any questions, please reach out on any of the channels that we mentioned during the presentation. We definitely want to have your votes in favor of this move. We think it's incredibly important for us as an entity, but more importantly, I think it's very important for the Eclipse community and our projects, and is setting us up for future growth. And we're very excited about this. So thanks so much, and we will talk again soon.
Thanks, everybody.